What's up, folks? I'm back for day 3 of my World Open recaps. Today was a really long, tough day, 2 very hard-fought games, and I don't want this video to be more than like 30 minutes, so I'm going to have to go through them with a relatively quick pace. So let's get right into it. First game, I got paired up against another opponent who I just had no intel on. Like, second game in a row, I'm playing some guy in their 30s that I had absolutely zero idea what they play. So my approach was basically Ivanchuk style. My preparation was just, I will play e4 and we'll see. So here we go, e4, and he plays c6, the Caro-Kann. So of all openings that he could have played, this is one of the best ones for me because I got the fantasy variation prepared. And he goes for basically the main line with bishop g4, bishop c4, knight d7. This is all pretty much theory, knight f6. And he was playing these moves like kind of slowly, and I was just blitzing them out. Like, I played this so many times that I like have the theory just like down, no problem. But the thing is, like, a lot of my practice in this opening has been through blitz games. But playing blitz and playing at a real classical game in this opening, 2 very different things. Because in blitz, like, you're just playing it on a very kind of shallow surface level, whatever, like, I'll play this and that, like, the game's over before you even realize what happened. But here I actually have to come up with some ideas. And this is like the first moment where I kind of like needed to start thinking. Idea here is that white has a nice center, obviously, and I have like, 2 nice bishops. But as nice as the center is, it's a bit loose in the long term. Like, if he makes some trades, activates his rooks, like, my center is going to be under heavy fire. So I have to like do things quickly. And here I knew that there's like a pretty standard maneuver where you play queen h4. But then I thought, okay, he just goes back, and I wasn't really sure what to do here. Like, I could trade in the center, but it's very like double-edged. I have to really like, play it right. So I decided just to play a sort of prophylactic waiting move, king h1, because I'm anticipating, if I ever do take, the diagonal is going to open, I could be checked, plus there's some ideas where like he could attack me down this diagonal, so I just need to have my king off of g1. So, I thought, useful move. Already Engine apparently says it's an inaccuracy, but whatever. He played b5 now. He's going for some queenside play, and then he plays c5, and I said, okay, I don't want him to shut my bishop down, so let's trade. And he took my bishop, and now it was time for me to start getting things going on the king side. I played queen g3, lining my queen up with his king, and sort of like preparing some attacking ideas. Basically what I was planning was, like, let's say he plays like a5 or something, I go knight h4, and I'm threatening to take the knight because I have the pin on the king. Like, for example, if he goes something like here, I can go take, and then I can take because I have the pin. But he played king h8, getting out of it. I played knight h4, and I was already like starting to calculate some sort of like attacking ideas, maybe sacrificing exchange. I was feeling pretty good about my position. And then he played queen b6, a move that I did not anticipate at all. And I was like, wait a minute, what's going on here? What is he up to? And then I started to realize that I could be in trouble here because he has total control over this diagonal. And what he might do next is play knight g4, and he's trying to get into f2. Like, for example, let's say a move that I wanted to play, right? Knight f5. He goes knight g4, and he's threatening to play knight f2 check. Now, maybe there was something here that I missed, and like maybe I'm just fine, but I started to kind of like dislike my position. I wasn't really sure what I did wrong, but I played h3 just to prevent knight g4. But apparently this was a mistake, because now he played bishop e2, a move that I saw coming, but one that's still very annoying, because he's hitting my rook. If I move my rook away, like if I move it to e1, looks like I attacked the bishop, great, right? Boom, bishop f2, fork, queen, and rook is hit. I'm losing the exchange. And even on top of that, he can play, like, my queen literally has to go to h2. He can play knight h5. He's threatening to go here. Like, things are just bad for me all of a sudden. So I played, I thought for a bit here. I was starting to get low on time. And actually, the funny thing was, at this moment, as I was really thinking on this move, the lights in the tournament hall started to go dim, and like they almost just went black, and like everyone is just like freaking out, like what's going on? People can't focus on their games. So in the middle of that happening, I decided to sack the exchange because I just felt like my position is kind of like I'm losing control here. I got to do something to, even if it means like sacrificing material, I got to do something to offset the balance. And so he took with the knight, and I took on e5, and I'm thinking, okay, I got a piece and a pawn for a rook. Could be some good compensation, right? But then he just played rook e8, and I sat here thinking, and the more I looked at this position, the more I realized that I'm a total clown for taking that pawn on e5, because that pawn, first of all, he can win the e4 pawn back, and second of all, I just opened the diagonal for him from, b8 to h2, and what's going to happen if I just go back, like I was planning, is that he can play knight h5, and my queen is getting kicked around. He can play bishop d6. Like, this is just horrific. I was also thinking about playing queen f5, but again, he can play knight h5, and he's threatening to come here with a fork. And I'm just like sitting here just in awe of how I could have totally misplayed this and let the position slip away. And so, when you're down and you feel like the momentum is shifting away from you, sometimes you have to take drastic action. So I decided to sacrifice my queen for a rook and a knight. And so we get to this odd position where I have, in exchange for a queen, 2 knights and a pawn. Where do you even see that? And, obviously black is better. Black is objectively probably winning. But what I proceeded to do was deny him any trade. Like, I literally just said no to every single trade. I need to keep as many pieces on the board as possible and try to work some magic with my minor pieces. And, objectively, it's winning for black, but it's not easy to figure out how. And already here, after rook d8, I played e5, and he made the first mistake. A move that I was very happy to see, g5, because he's kind of exposing his king, and he's weakening his pawn structure. And I played knight f5, and now he played bishop d3, and he thought, oh, great, I'm forcing a trade, right? Because if my bishop moves away, he can take the knight. But I took, and then took f6, and then he realized that he cannot take with the queen because I have bishop e5, pinning. And if he can't take, then what is he going to do? I have a passed pawn 2 squares away from queening. Suddenly, like, he's in trouble. He played king g8, and now I started to turn the tables on him. Like, the moves that I played here may have not even been the most accurate because I was getting pretty low on time, but I played f7 check, giving up the pawn, but now I hit him with the fork. And I'm going to win the rook back. And he has to choose which square he wants for his king. He chose f6, thinking that, oh, I take his rook, he takes my knight. But no, I throw in rook f1. And now his king is just standing in the line of fire. Like, if he moves his rook back, I can actually just take the bishop with check. Now I have 2 knights and a bishop for a queen. So he played the move bishop f4, blocking the rook. But now I took, he took, and now I could have taken the bishop and gone into this endgame where it's like rook and bishop versus queen. Probably like close to a draw. But instead I played g3. And I'm preparing to win his bishop for a pawn, after which I will be up bishop, knight, and rook for a queen. Huge difference. And here I think he made a mistake. I believe what he should have played was queen e3. And I think he would be able to maybe even make a draw here. I saw this move and I wasn't sure if I would be able to win if he played it, because obviously if I take the bishop right away, he takes my knight. But if I drop the knight back, he can start checking. He can go check, check. He can go check here, and like eventually, I think it's just a perpetual. Like, he just keeps giving checks, and I can't really escape them without losing something. But he had like a minute left at this point. And, a lot of these games that I'm showing you, like, and the latter one included, there are a lot of things that are decided in time trouble. It's unfortunate, but that's just the reality. He played queen c6 here, and now he's just doomed to lose his bishop. And suddenly, even though he gets a pawn back, we go into this endgame where I have a rook, a bishop, and a knight for a queen. And all I need to do here is stabilize, defend my pawn, force his queen to go back. I gave a check and I played here. And at this point, I was pretty sure that I was winning, because I secured everything. made sure I still have 3 pawns, and his king is in pretty dangerous territory. And I was kind of like starting to think, how do I like put him in a mating net? Like this is almost a study-like position where you have to work some magic with the minor pieces. And the move I came up with was knight c6, attacking his queen. He goes check, and it looks like it's a fork, but I cover with knight e5. And already I suspect here it's lost for him because his king is just out in the open. He doesn't really have any mobility. He played a5, and now white to play. How can I put the game away here? Well, the move that I played in this position was the move rook f5 check. Check, obviously, he can't go here because this is already mate. And when he goes to h6, here I actually had a couple winning moves. The one I saw in the game that looked the cleanest was just bishop e3 check. And he actually resigned here because king g7, I go check, and I win his queen for the rook and the knight, and this endgame is just winning because I have the bishop. I have enough pawns to pretty much convert without any problems. Turns out there was actually an even nicer win. It was actually just rook f7 here, which I didn't realize at the time, but the point is that I'm actually winning the queen for a rook, because if he moves his queen, we would have check, and basically that's checkmate, right? I mean, he has to block the queen. I didn't see that in the game. Like for me, once I saw a way to win, I just went for it. Like I wasn't going to spend a bunch of time like looking for the most precise solution, but somehow, I managed to win that game out of nowhere. Was probably just dead lost at some point, but fought back and complicated the position enough to basically swindle him. On to the next. So this game, round 5, I'm up against a kid, about 15 or 16, about 2140 USCF. He had a very strong performance at the National Open. My last round opponent was 2100, by the way, forgot to mention. And for this round, I knew he was going to play d4. That's the one thing I basically knew. And I prepared basically, well, I didn't actually prepare for this game. I had very little time. Like, I ate lunch, and then I had a little bit of time to rest. So I knew he was going to play d4, and I'm just going to play my stuff, e5 here, which I like to call the new Indian defense. It's kind of like an opening that's not very common, but objectively I think is pretty good. And after d5, f5, I just get a better version of like some sort of King's Indian or Dutch structure. And I play knight f6. And here he played this interesting move, which I've seen before, like in Blitz, e4. Giving up a pawn, but the point is that white is going to win it back. And he played knight e2. And I played the move bishop f5. I've prepped all of this before. I kind of know this line. I call it like the advanced variation when white plays d5. He played knight g3, he dropped back, and he played h4 here. And I was like, huh? h4. I was expecting that he was just going to play queen c2, and then I was going to play bishop e7, he takes, and then I just castle. That's what I was remembered from my prep. But he played h4, and I was like, I can't be right. If this move was actually good, I would have seen it before, right? Like, I mean, I've looked at this line before. But, I spent like 8 or 9 minutes here. I really was thrown off. I mean, like, what happened? This move is actually like causing me some problems because he's just threatening to drive my bishop back, and this pawn also could break up my king side. It's going to make it hard for me to castle. I didn't want to play h5 because he can play bishop e2 and try to win the pawn. I didn't want to play h6 because then he can play queen g4 and my bishop's hit. If it goes here, then I don't know, maybe he just takes. If I go here, he can throw in this check, and then if I block, my bishop just looks silly. I was like, what is going on? What am I supposed to do? And I played knight d7. Now, it turns out, what I only found out when I got back to my hotel room, that I had actually completely messed up my prep, and in this position, I was supposed to go bishop e7, and after knight g3, only here was I supposed to go bishop f5. A few moves later, and then we would get this position where I'm already castled, I already have 2 bishops developed, and now if he plays h4, I just take. Like, it's not scary. So, yeah. I went from a position I was supposed to get that, like, after 10 moves, pretty much equal. Like, black is just doing totally fine. I have the open f-file. to a position where it's like maybe +1 or +1.5 for white. Just, he gave him advantage for nothing. Like, I just completely messed up my prep, and now I'm having to suffer because he plays h5, and my bishop ends up on f7, like where it does not want to be. And now he took. I played h6 just to stop him from going to g5, and he plays g4. I was like, what is going on? He is just trying to kill me on the king side. But at the same time, I was thinking, like, okay, if he's going to commit all these pawns forward, then he's not going to castle king side, and he already has these pawns pushed, so if he castles queen side, it's not going to be the safest thing. So I was kind of like hoping that he would overextend here. So I played bishop e7. He played rook g1. I was like, okay, knight f6. If you trade, then you can't go g5 because I will just take you, and I have enough defenders on the bishop. If you play g5 here, I'd take your knight. So maybe what he could have done was like drop back like this and tried to get to f5. Looked a little bit annoying. Instead, he just played queen d3, and I took and played bishop g5. And I think what he was banking on was that he would have this move f4, where my bishop is hit and I can't take because of the pin. But what he didn't realize is that I would have this check. And now he has to move his king. And if he moves it to e2, then he just looks silly. I mean, I just go here. If he goes to d1, I would have gone here and then here. And I'm defending the pawn, and my bishop is like perfectly positioned in the center. So he thought for a while and just played bishop e3 here. I played queen f6, sort of like setting a trap for him. If he long castles, it's actually a mistake because I can take here because of the pin. And I'm winning a pawn and, doing pretty well. He played bishop d3 here, and now, I can't castle short because I would actually be castling into checkmate. And I don't want a long castle yet. I mean, I guess I could have here, but I was concerned that I'm just dropping this pawn, and if I try to trap his bishop, he's just going to go like commandoing on me here. Maybe it doesn't work, but I don't know. It looked scary. So I played the move bishop g8 because my idea for many moves was to try to get the bishop to h7, where it would actually be useful, and then try to hit him on this diagonal, maybe like skewer him. And I was thinking, okay, if he goes check, I just go here, and like if we trade down, I'm perfectly satisfied with this endgame. I might even be better here. But he thought for a bit, and he surprised me with the following move, which I thought was very good, c5. At first, I didn't understand this move. I was like, okay, what if I still play bishop h7? What are you going to do? And then it dawned on me that his idea was to go queen a4 check. Because if I move my king, right, I mean, I don't want to block with the pawn because he's going to take and then take. And I'm in trouble. But where do I move my king? I mean, if I go to like e7, he can just initiate a bunch of trades, and then he's just going to go king e2 and prepare rook c1 and try to go here. And I thought that this was pretty concerning. Like, I didn't like this position. So I decided not to allow any checks. I made the risky decision to trade, give a check so that he wouldn't be able to castle, and then castle myself. Now, maybe what would have been better was to, like, I don't know, go king e7 or something and not long castle, because what happened was he played rook h1, a move I missed because it kicks my queen back, and now c6. And suddenly, things are getting pretty concerning because all he wants to do is bring his queen over and checkmate me over here. Like, for example, if I, let's say, take the pawn, he takes, and if I go here, he just goes here, and he's coming in here, and it's going to be checkmate. I'm in trouble. And if I play b6, right, he still comes here, and he's coming here, and it's going to be mate. So I played bishop h7, he played queen b4. I took his bishop, he took with the king. And this position is just nuts, because his king is like in the center, but it's somehow safer than mine because he has these pawns. And again, I can't play b6 because he just plays queen b5, and he's going to mate me. So I found what I believe is the best move, kind of a move that he didn't see coming, that saved me, e4 check. what does this move do? Well, it kind of distracts him. It gives a check, so he has to do something, right? He can move his king back, but then he would be dropping this pawn. He can move here, but then I would take and then force a queen trade. And he's not in time to checkmate me. So he decided to take by queen. And already at this point, like, there were ways for me to go into an endgame. Like, I could have played maybe rook e8, and then we would have some endgame like this, where like maybe I can win a pawn back. But instead I took and then played check. And then he blocked. And I thought about taking this endgame, and it looked like maybe I can hold it, even though I'm down a pawn. But I played queen b6. And my idea was, you know what? We're not going to trade queens, because your king is still in the center. I might be down a pawn, but what are you going to do? How are you going to keep yourself safe? And I was feeling pretty good at this point. I'm like, I'm about to bring my rooks over. I'm about to hit him on this pawn. I can play d5 at some point. His king is on d3. Like, how does he protect himself? And he was thinking for a while. He was kind of sweating a little bit. But eventually he found a maneuver which I did not see. And it's a fairly simple maneuver just to trade queens. Check. And queen back. And now the queens are coming off because there's nothing I can do to avoid it when my queen is pinned. So I decided to bring my rook over, allowing him to take my queen so that I could take like this and then blockade the pawn. And really, like, this c6 pawn is just, it's very unfortunate that it's so far advanced, because it makes things so hard for me. Like, if this pawn wasn't here, or if it was at least a few squares back, would have been pretty hard for him to win. And it's still not easy, but from this point on, I really started to suffer. I thought that I could hold it, but he brought his rook over, he advanced here, and we were both getting very low on time. Some of these moves he was making with under a minute on the clock as we tried to reach time control. We're on move 35 at this point. I played king b6, thinking that I can win this pawn, but then he played a4. Tricky move. I can't guard the pawn, because then he goes a5 and drives my king back. So I decided to take, but now he plays b5, and his pawn is guarded. So I played a6, trying to break. He took, I took, and he played rook d5. And somewhere around here, like, it was still within the realms of possibility of me drawing, but I think here was like the last move before time control. And I messed things up. I think, actually, I'm not even sure what I should have done. I was not happy with my move rook e6, because it put my rook in a very sort of awkward position, very passive, and he just went back with the rook and gave a check. And now I played this interesting looking move, rook takes c6, with the point being that if he takes here, I take here, but he instead took the pawn, gave a check, gave another check, won my pawn here. Nothing I could have done to stop it by this point. And so we get to this point where it's 2 rooks each, but he has an extra pawn, and he's invaded my 7th rank. So things are looking pretty dire for me at this point. He played rook a4, gave a couple checks, then he played rook c4. Clever move, trading off one pair of rooks, and even though I take this pawn, he now plays here. And he wins the pawn back, and now there's just a completely winning endgame for white, because he's going to win my h6 pawn, not much I can do to stop that, and my king is simply too far away. And so, I put up as much of a fight as I could, made it hard for him, but eventually he got the pawn, and 2 connected pass pawns, obviously it's completely winning. But it's not always so easy, like, I've played this endgame out sometimes against the engine, and there are some tricks. Like, you'll be surprised how hard the engine makes winning this position, where white has 2 pass pawns. It can be very tricky. There's some stalemate traps. But, first of all, I'm not an engine, so I don't really know where to put these traps in. And second of all, he has plenty of time to figure out what to do. So, I gave a check here, came back. I always have to watch out for my back rank, but he just played h6, and he played h7. Like, the only trap here really is if he plays g7 and then plays king g6, and it looks like he's about to checkmate me, I would have rook c6 check, and it's a draw. Because if he takes, it's stalemate. And if he doesn't take, then he's losing. Because I would just take here. So That's the only trick, but he didn't even come close to falling for it. He just gave a check, and then he went around, and I resigned in this position because I'm getting checkmated with the next move, pawn g7. And if I pin him, then there's back me. So yeah, that was a very, very tough game. Um, you know, really hurt me that I messed up my prep. Like I would have had an equal position, good fighting chances with black. Instead, I just got a significantly worse position out of the opening, which I was still able to like get it to be equal at some points, but the position was just like so wild and so complicated that obviously I made some inaccuracies or some mistakes and just ended up getting outplayed. So yeah, tough result. I finished the first 5 rounds with a 50% score, 2.5. Again, not terrible, but I just feel like I've been kind of hard done. Like so many decisive mistakes have been going on in time pressure, like practically every game. It was just kind of like sad when you realize that it's more a game of clock than a game of or a tournament of chess at this point, because like every game practically I feel like has been decided one way or another in time pressure. And I mean, you just gotta, that's what time management is for, I guess. Gotta manage your time so that you're not the one making those mistakes. Like I've noticed that whenever I'm the one with very low time, I make the mistakes, and whatever my opponents under a minute, that's when they screw up. So gotta just find yourself on the right side of the clock situation, I guess. Um, but yeah, I feel a little bit hard done. I feel like I could be on 3 or 3.5 easily, based on how I've played throughout some of these games. But 50% score isn't the worst thing. I'm just gonna try to win as many of my remaining 4 games as possible, and yeah, stay tuned for tomorrow's recap.